Hello and welcome to the Pod Well Travelled. I'm Stephen Scourfield, the travel editor here at 7 West Media WA, and I'm with Mogens Johansen, who's travel writer, photographer, and just back from Asia. So, of course, Mogens, we're one hop to Singapore, 5 hours to Singapore from where we're based in Perth, but that wasn't really the object of the exercise, was it?
No, not really on this occasion. We often talk about dual destination holidays, and we certainly do it a lot when we travel to Europe or perhaps South America or something like that. We don't sort of generally speaking just stick to one country. We tend to hop around from one to another, but it's perhaps less common here on our doorstep in Southeast Asia, for example. I think many of us will head up to Bali or Singapore or something like that, and then stay there, Thailand even, and perhaps not visit any of the neighbouring countries, which we had been talking a little bit about, and we kind of think that's a shame, because there's a lot of different experiences to be had, different cultures and different people. They all make for a good holiday, and certainly the contrast I experienced in this recent trip up to Singapore and onto Cambodia just about couldn't be greater.
It's great. Well, contrast is the word, isn't it? Because I suppose in Singapore is what we imagine it to be, which is efficient and very modern, and Cambodia by comparison is probably more it's a more localized, regional, developing experience. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Singapore is that sort of, it's an exciting destination in its own right. As you said, it's clean and safe and well-functioning and so on. But there's still a lot of, great things to experience. You can still, it's not all about the big, high-rise buildings and the flash shopping malls and so on. You can still get a feel for real Asia, if I can put it that way, which is, the little enclaves like Chinatown and Little India and the Arab Quarter and that sort of stuff. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not better or worse, is it? It's just different. The two destinations you've chosen are different. So you moved around with Singapore Airlines, is that the way?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and they're, to me personally, I always find them really reliable and good to go with. I mean, when I head back to see my family in Denmark, I often go through Singapore, just because I like that 5 hours to Singapore, or less than 5 hours to Singapore, and then you have a bit of a break, and then from there on, it's just one longer haul, and that kind of suits me. But in particular, when you're like I did just now, visiting sort of other Southeast Asian countries, it's just such a perfect springboard. Singapore is on the same time zone as us, so it's, as I said, less than 5 hours up there. There's good connections daily, and likewise onwards from there through Changi Airport, you can just about get to anywhere in the world, and from Changi to Siem Reap in Cambodia, which was the leg I did, is less than 2 hours, and there's a 1 hour time difference.
Wow!
So it's a nice connection.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. So you stayed, I think, at Sentosa in Singapore?
Yes, I did, and that's a bit of a different experience. I haven't actually stayed at Sentosa before. Sentosa, for those who don't know, is sort of like the Singaporean holiday island, if you like. But I mean, it's really just a hop, skip, and a jump across the water, and you can take, either there's a monorail that go over there, or there's a causeway that heads across there, and there's also the cable car. So it's a nice destination, but it's different from Singapore itself because it is sort of developed specifically as
as a holiday destination. So there's some quite nice beaches, and there's all kinds of entertainment and activities you can do there. That they've got things like what's it called, the Universal Studios theme park there, and fantastic aquarium. There's great exhibitions. There's light shows at night. There's fun rides and activities for sort of people who are into sort of more active things. So there's a huge range of stuff to do there.
The last time I stayed at Sentosa, I'd made appointments. I'd planned to go over, into old part of Singapore and do some meetings and see some things there, and I never got over there. It was just I was in my own little world in Sentosa, really busy. Lots of, as you say, lots of things to do. The museum there is a real favourite of mine, and I didn't get off Sentosa.
No, there really is so much to do, and as you mentioned, the museum is interesting. There's a Point Siloso. It was a sort of military base back in the day, when the British were sort of ruling in Singapore, and that Sentosa was considered sort of a good place to have a military base, because they felt they could protect invaders from coming from the Straits of Singapore. So there's a lot of history in that sense from at Fort Siloso, as it's called. So that's another interesting thing. So there really is something for everyone there. And I think it's like Singapore is not a big place by any stretch of the imagination. And I went one evening. I went into Clarke Quay just to have a meal in there, and just to check out that sort of vibrant riverside precinct in the city itself. And from when I stepped outside my hotel, in less than 15 minutes you're in the centre of town, using the MRT and the monorail. So
you shame me now, because you did get off the island, so you're obviously far more active than I am. So from Singapore you then fly on this, as you say, less than 2 hours to Siem Reap, which of course is known for Angkor Wat, the temples there above all else, I suppose. So was that a big thing for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I had been there before, about probably 15 years ago, and it's certainly it's changed a lot. Of course, the whole archaeological park there, Angkor Archaeological Park, is much the same. I think it's certainly my impression was that all the surrounding sort of parklands and that are looking a lot better than what they did 15 years ago. So it's quite a sort of really pleasant place to be, and it's only a 10-minute tuk-tuk drive out from the centre of Siem Reap. So it's really nice and close, and you can spend literally days there looking at all the different temples and shrines and so on. I did a little tour, sort of a half-day tour, I guess, but I managed to sort of see Angkor Wat, the main temple itself, Angkor Thom, the old town, I guess, where the Bayon Temple is the centre of which the Bayon Temple is the centre of, should I say. I sort of managed to explore a few of the other lesser known temples as well, and had a really good day doing it. So it's a super interesting place to sort of mooch around, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. I think that's such an important point, that most people who haven't visited think of Angkor Wat as that main temple, but as you say, it's a whole archaeological park just full of them. And they do vary. They're varied in style and features, aren't they?
Yeah, I must. Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of them they're mostly Buddhist temples, but they have had
some of them, Angkor Wat, for example, I think was originally Hindu temple in when it was first made. So they have different and interesting histories. And of course, then there's I think my favourite one was Ta Prohm, which is like the one. Those of you who can remember Lara Croft and Raiders of the Lost Ark or something like that. One of those movies, anyway, where there's a famous scene outside one of these temples there, where the forest have virtually taken over the temple and is pulling it apart. You got these giant fig trees that are pushing this magnificent stonework apart, and it's quite a sight seeing these trees sort of basically taking back their place. I guess you could say.
Well, that really is the sort of story of the place as well, isn't it? It was overgrown and, I mean, not exactly, more or less forgotten, except by some locals, of course, and reopened up as an archaeological site. So the Indiana Jones story is not far removed from this one either.
No.
Well, my favourite actually is the Bayon Temple, Angkor Thom, the Bayon Temple, because they're all smiling.
Yeah, exactly. There's all these magnificent faces.
Yeah, huge smiling faces. Yeah. It's a very picturesque place there, and it's again a super interesting place to sort of rummage around, because a lot of that has sort of crumbled as well, and sort of in parts of the surrounds there's piles and piles of boulder stones that it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle they're trying to put together again. So it's that's from memory, that's a 12th century temple, and I think there's nearly 40 stone houses still sort of visible there, temple houses around that too. So so once again, for people listening who haven't been there, there's more than just a temple to see. There's a whole kind of civilization to be glimpsed.
And for those who are interested in the sort of archaeology of it, and the work that's going on, there's several places around where, obviously there's restoration and maintenance going on. So you can kind of see how they go about that as well, which is another interesting aspect to it.
Yeah, and Siem Reap itself is quite, I've been going there for quite a long time, and it's really developed. It's grown into quite a place in its own right, I think, now. Yeah,
that's a lovely place, I think. It certainly since I was there last, it's developed a lot. There's a lot more shops and so on, and probably also, fair to say, better hotels than there was 15, 20 years ago. But it's still got that sort of real character about it. There's lots of markets and street side tuk-tuk cafes and so on that sort of pop up in the evenings, and families sit on these tiny plastic chairs alongside the river and have family dinner and that sort of stuff. It's just an interesting place to go around. And then, of course, up in the centre of town, those who may have been there, it's always been called Pub Street, I think, as far back as I can remember. But Pub Street is now a sort of really sort of quite a modern and vibrant sort of fun place to go if you're going out for a drink or two at night. And, they've got good restaurants, good entertainment. There's lots of music, live music, karaoke, all kinds of things going on there. So that's an interesting place to spend an evening as well.
Yeah, well, I can hear in everything you're saying that you found the contrast you were looking for in this. What for us from Perth can be a nice short trip. A week or 10 days from Perth to Singapore, Siem Reap. Getting that contrast between Singapore and Cambodia is really an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and of course, there's lots of other opportunities. Thailand, Vietnam, and
Myanmar and so on. There's lots of opportunities just within the same striking distance from Singapore, for example.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Good time of year. We're mid-year now in June.
Yeah, it's just coming into the wet season up there. So it was, I have to say, in particular in Cambodia, quite humid. But so you just do need to bear that in mind. But it wasn't too bad. I didn't find it too bad, in particular when you are moving around in tuk-tuks and so on.
Most of these tropical rainforest places, they are warm and quite often humid all year, really. So,
and it's good for your skin. It cleans out the pores and all that sort of
stuff. Thanks for sharing that. So, look, okay, well, we'll move into our next subject now, which is, by contrast, I suppose. We're in Perth, as we keep saying, and it seems to me that just about everybody's wearing a puffer jacket in Perth winter. It's become the de rigueur item, particularly for travellers, of course. Light, easy to pack. You've got one?
Yeah. Oh, I have, yeah. But I understand you've been looking into the Patagonia outdoor wear in particular, because they're doing some interesting things with sort of recycling ghost nets and using that in some of the outdoor wear.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, Patagonia as a brand has been such an interesting story for most of my working life, actually. It's just, as a company, it's just had its 50th anniversary. And, quite famously, it was started by a climber, Yvonne Chouinard, who couldn't find the pitons that he wanted, couldn't find some of the climbing gear he wanted, and started making them, which is not an unfamiliar story, I suppose, with some companies. We've seen that in outdoor companies, in other places. But Yvonne set up this company, Patagonia, and what's always impressed me has been their ethical position. There's always been an ethics centre as part of the business, and they've always given away 1% of their turnover to charities. And in the very early days, I actually did a number of stories, because the story then was that their managers were sent out to find the projects that they wanted to commit to, so they weren't just sort of taking applications, as it were. It was much more proactive, and I guess I've watched that progress into this interesting, complete change in the company, where firstly, as you say, they've launched a line called NetPlus, and these are items including puffer jacket and puffer vests, which are made from recycled fishing nets. So they have a partner called Burio who collects fishing nets. They're based in South America, and the nets then fishing nets are pretty nasty things. The WWF reckons that nets can last between 400 and 600 years in water, because they're polypropylene, polyethylene and nylon, this polyamide plastic. And I'm sure we've all picked up or seen bits of fishing net along the shoreline, and it's just tough as, it just doesn't break down. And of course, in an oceanic sense, one of the great disasters that happens is, as you say, ghost nets, this phrase where nets are cast adrift or left in the oceans, and they basically just carry on mowing the oceans for, can be hundreds of years, as I've said. So they just drift around catching everything that's before them.
Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a nightmare. So Patagonia say partnering with Burio, and they're collecting these nets. The nets are chopped, melted, and then they're created into thread, into weave, and they're woven into new fabrics, and they're making this whole range. In fact, I'm just looking at, they've got caps and shorts and all sorts made out of recycled fishing nets, which is just fantastic. It's a fantastic story.
It's a great idea, yeah.
It's come at a weird moment too, because Patagonia, so Yvonne Chouinard has, the story has been that he's given away the company, but in actual fact, it's a very complicated process that they've gone through. So rather than selling the company as he's come into his 80s and, sort of retirement. Rather than selling the company or floating it or doing anything else with it, they've set up a whole new ownership structure, and he's given it to that. So as he says, the only shareholder now is the Earth. So in layman's language, it's almost a non-profit, that all the profits go back into these other projects. So it's a massive company with billions of dollars of turnover and, worth billions of dollars. And
that's a nice story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story. In fact, Mogens, because it's way beyond my capacity, we actually got our colleagues at Bloomberg, the business colleagues there, to look into exactly how this ownership was set up, because and I use the word carefully, it is unique. So they've sort of established a new form of ownership of companies and a new structure, which has sort of been embedded now in American law, which is not an easy thing. So they've kind of also opened the doorway for, it's not gifting, and it's not setting up a charitable business as such. So it is a new form of ownership. So I've also got our colleagues there to do a story about that, and they've gone into specifics, because I do think, a lot of our audience, a lot of our readers are business people, and the actual structure of that, I think, is very interesting to see the detail, because it does
look forward to reading that.
Yeah, it does. It opens a doorway to other people to use this mechanism that's now been developed. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. So
super interesting.
Yeah,
so many fronts.
It is. It's interesting. I was just looking at. There's another brand I like very much. Is Helly Hansen, which is a Norwegian brand, and I see now they use their puffer jackets, what they call monomaterial, so that the outer shell and the lining are all made from the same material, because it's much easier to recycle clothing items like that, multi-layered clothing items, if they are all the same material. It's when you've got to take them all apart that they become less easy or less possible to recycle, I suppose. So
I noticed. I think I've definitely written about it as well in certain mobile phones. The recycling of fishing nets is also a big thing. I think it's Samsung that use fishing net or ghost nets, the materials from them to manufacture some of the plastic. What would you call it? Plastic that's required inside the phone as such. So they've also gone down that path, and I think the more manufacturers across the board that can do that, the better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading some words here that Yvon Chouinard has written himself. He started that company in 1973. And, it's been valued at $3 billion. So what he's done is pretty significant. And he writes, the climate crisis is an existential threat. Carbon neutral is not enough. Purchasing offsets to get a carbon neutral doesn't erase the footprint we create and won't save us in the long run. Our goal was to cut emissions from our owned and operated stores, offices and distribution centres. So now the bulk of their emissions have been cut, and he's making the point that offsetting emissions isn't the same as not creating emissions. So that's where they're working towards.
Yeah,
interesting.
That's great.
So I'm
super good.
Tucked up in my puffer jacket this morning, thinking about your hot and steamy time in Cambodia. What a
What a contrast!
We've had a great contrast this morning on the show. So, the stories that we've been talking about are all published in the West Australian on Saturdays, in the Travel Supplement on Saturdays, and in the Sunday Time on Sundays. And Mogens has a lot of stories. He's already been filing these stories, and I've just been looking through. So you can expect a dozen stories out of that trip, one way and another. The story on Patagonia is actually published this weekend, which is June the 17th in Saturday's copy of Travel in the West Australian. But of course, they all go online at thewest.com.au/travel. We also have some other content up on westtravelclub.com.au. We've just, last week, through eTravel, which is our weekly newsletter, which goes out on Wednesday, we launched our Coach Days, which Mogens and I are joined by Grady Brand, who's a WA landscape specialist and wildflower specialist here in Western Australia. We launched those last Wednesday, as I say, and they were in print on Saturday, Sunday, and they'd sold out on Monday. So anyone interested and who's local to us here, do by all means go to westtravelclub.com.au/join. All we ask for is your first name, your second name, and your email address, and you'll get to hear about those things first. Because if you wait for Saturday or Sunday's print, or for the stories to go online, you may be too late. So that's how that played out. They're full, Mogens.
They're very, very popular, and looking forward to it again.
Yeah, it'd be great. Grady's on the flora and the landscape. Mogens is on photography with phones in particular, photography in general, and I'm just hanging around. And we're doing 3 days of that, and looking forward to it. Be great.
Can't wait. Yeah.
Okay, mate. Thanks very much, and we'll talk again next week.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Stephen.
Cheers, man. Thanks.